Hi, I'm Lonna Kelly, and this is Hudson Valley Art Speak. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We're going to be talking to Jeane Plekon, who is a painter and mostly an oil painter. Hi, Jeanne.
Hi, Lonna.
Thanks for coming.
Happy to be here.
Thanks. I said mostly an oil painter. Do you do watercolors also, or are you strictly oils?
I'm strictly oils. Watercolor is a little bit scary. I've never trained in it. I don't think I could control it. With oil, it moves slowly and it's forgiving. You can make a mess out of it, but I find it's the right speed for me.
Right, and it takes a long time to dry, so you can go back in and change it.
Yeah, it's very forgiving.
Yeah.
I guess there is one other medium I've painted in, and I don't think you've seen any of those works, but I show them in my studio during the Art East tour, and those are religious icons.
Oh, really?
Painted in the classic egg tempera technique, which is so different from every other kind of painting. It's done on a horizontal surface, and it's almost like the rule of the painting, or they call it writing an icon, is to not show the artist's brushwork, not to show the artist's hand. And so it's done with pools of water and drops of pigment. You kind of guide the pigment by drawing the pool of water out, and then it very slowly dries. But there's no brushwork that's seen, and it's really quite an extraordinary medium, but I haven't done any for a while.
It must take a tremendous amount of time to do one.
Yeah, it's iterative, and layer upon layer builds up, and it's a very, very structured technique, and a lot of rules and limitations about the images that you portray and how you portray them, the kind of pigment you use, but there's a lot of liberty within those confines. But that's something I did maybe 15 years ago.
But that's on wood? Just
yeah,
let me ask that.
It's on a wood panel, and we make our own gesso out of powdered marble and Knox gelatin, and we apply gold leaf the old-fashioned way. We use garlic as an adhesive. It's just a wonderfully
really?
organic, it's a fascinating ancient technique.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
To be able to go out and paint on a vertical surface with a brush and looking at nature and do whatever comes to mind or whatever's in front of you, it's quite a departure. So it's fun to be able to do both ends of the continuum.
It must be after working on an icon and then going out in the field to paint. It must feel very freeing.
Exactly.
To do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So your subjects are mainly landscapes?
Yes, I've done one dog portrait of what was his name? He had a military name, Admiral Jensen.
What's the dog's name?
Yes, I met a Cocker Spaniel out by the Great Swamp one day and did a portrait of him. And I've done a couple still lifes. One was donated to the Pauling Farmers Market silent auction when they had their dinner. And a bucket of peonies I did during a workshop. Primarily that's it. I've so far avoided doing any people in a way that's recognizable, like facial portraits.
Right. Yeah.
But I may be getting a job to do painting from a photograph of a kid in his hockey gear and with the helmet
with
on.
The mask on.
Yeah, I think I may be able to handle that without creating anything offensive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, you do house portraits, don't you?
Well, that's true. That's what I call them. And they're pretty well received. But people who ask me to paint them know that they want to have a realistic image of a place that's meaningful to them. And that's very gratifying to be able to deliver something that meets what they're looking for.
How did you get started in painting?
I knew that my decades-long career in the corporate world was coming to an end. It was quite clearly a signpost down the road a year ahead. And so I knew I was going to need to find something to do. And one day, when I was sitting in my doctor's office, I picked up a magazine, and it was called PleinAir. And I thought to myself, there's a whole magazine. This is a thing. People do this. There are biographies of people written and materials being sold and workshops. And I could not believe that there was a whole community of people who paint plein air. So I took my first workshop with John Trainer up in New Hampshire like 2.5 years ago. And then I've continued to take workshops with a number of other instructors and never looked back, and it's wonderful.
So for somebody who might not know what that means in plein air, would you just explain that?
Sure. There are some gray areas around the edges of what constitutes true plein air painting, but in general it means in open air. So rather than being in the studio painting, you go outside, you set up your easel outside, and I jokingly say on my tour that with a straw hat and bug spray and sunscreen, you're all set for, and a bottle of water for painting all day. Some people then have discussions online about, well, if you are outside and you paint the interior of a room through a doorway, is that plein air painting? Or if you're inside the room and you paint the backyard, is that plein air painting? And I don't know. Those are the gray areas.
You might not even care.
No, it
No.
doesn't. And the other point I would add is that there's, in some circles, a limitation as to how much of a painting you can modify after you've left the field and still call it plein air. There's usually an allowance of some amount, and I think maybe the strictest I've heard is 5%. But there's a lot of give there, and I don't know of anybody who's ever been arrested for calling something plein air if it was 7% done in the studio.
Right, right. So you travel throughout the Hudson Valley painting?
Yes. And I have painted in Maine, where my daughter lives. Not very much, not as much as I'd like to. I want to get back up there and paint. And a little bit in Ulster County, but mostly here in the Hudson and Harlem Valley. There's really no end of beautiful things to paint.
Yeah, one of the paintings that I saw of yours is at Innisfree, which is such an incredible garden. It's I don't think
up in
a lot of people know about it, so it's such a treasure.
It's a wonderful place to paint.
Yeah.
They're very welcoming, and a lot of sites. I've done a number of paintings up there. Haven't gotten back there this year, but it's always there.
Yeah. And how about the walkway of the Hudson?
I did one painting from a photograph of the walkway looking south across the Mid-Hudson Bridge, and on a very gray day when the river was kind of a cocoa color, kind of a chalky light brown on a cloudy day, and that one sold. Got that one sold in Wilton, Connecticut at an art fair.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had painted a shore painting from a photograph based on a photo I'd taken in Maine of the body of water between Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Kittery, and I did it specifically so I would have something with a shoreline content for an art show in Connecticut, and it gets a lot of compliments. It's a good painting, but when it was showing there, it was under a 10 by 10 tent in the middle of the town green. A fellow came up and looked at it, and then he looked at me, and he looked at the painting, he looked at me, he said, "That's not from around here." I said, "Gee, you caught me, how could you tell?" And he said, "That boat, that's a lobster boat. We don't have those around."
Oh, really?
Here." Yeah. So I was gratified that I had rendered it well enough that he could tell what kind of boat it was,
well, that's
but
true.
a little embarrassed that he busted me for trying to sell a Maine painting to a Connecticut audience.
So you're bi-coastal, and so you paint in the Hudson and Harlem valleys, and where do you're in California also?
In Southern California during the cold weather here. We've been fortunate to find a place in the Sonoran Desert an hour, it's closer to San Diego than LA, but it's an hour from civilization. So it's a very active community of a lot of snowbirds, but because it's so far away from medical care and convenient large shopping, it's kind of a self-selecting community of very active seniors. So there's a lot of biking and hiking. There's a PleinAir invitational every winter. There's a film festival. There's a crew of people that go out and pull weeds in the desert to keep the invasive species under control. There's a number of golf courses. So it's an active community, and PleinAir painting is one of the groups that gather once a week, once or twice a week, and go out and paint the canyons and the cactuses.
Yeah. So how is your practice different between New York and California? Is there a difference in the way the paint dries, or in the light, and of course your subject matter is different?
Yeah, all of the above. The environment can be much harsher out there, so we tend to start earlier in the day, but drinking plenty of water, it can get up, high, but it's very dry. The paint dries faster. You have more mosquitoes and gnats here in the east, and of course the palette is different.
Right.
I have caught myself saying untrue things, like there's no green out there. I went back and looked at my desert paintings during my tour, and there is green, but it's it's a much different green. It's a sagey
more
green,
gray green,
a gray green,
yeah.
And sometimes when you catch the real green, like on a golf course, it's almost shocking what color it is. It really doesn't belong there. And then palm trees and bright yellow. What are they called? I can't remember the word for it, but it means green branch. Palos Verde, Palo Verde trees. They have green branches and bright yellow blossoms.
Yeah. Where can people see your work?
Well, that's at the Artie Studio Tour this coming weekend from 11 to 5. And then after that, it won't be visible on the East Coast until next spring when the farmers market opens up.
Okay. But people can always visit your website, see what you're doing there, right?
Yeah, I try to keep it up to date, but I've got contact information if anybody's interested in anything that's on the website.
Yeah.
They should contact me.
So do you see any different direction that you might be heading in terms of painting?
Well, when I think that I might be getting stuck picking standard subject matter, I truly am of the belief that a work of art needn't be a beautiful subject. It needs to be beautifully painted. So a challenge I want to give myself is to travel up Route 55 from Pawling to Poughkeepsie and stop at 2-mile intervals, and whatever I find there, do a painting. Whether it's the back door of a gas station or it's a bunch of woods that have been cut.
So maybe we can get you back here to show us those paintings.
That'd be fun.
Thanks so much,
like
Jeane
that.
Plekon.